Hello, YouTube family. Thanks for tuning in. Whether you found this video on purpose or by accident, thanks for watching. Please, if you liked the video, please subscribe, and you can ring the bell for notifications. Hopefully that will work if you do so. Let's jump into today's episode, which is dealing with Ben Shapiro's horrible defense of Ted Cruz. Ben Shapiro is, in my opinion, a right-wing political hack. He's full of logical fallacy and BS, disingenuous, bad faith argument. And every time I've seen him come up against someone who actually gave intelligent pushback, challenging his positions on stuff, he just crumbles apart. And let's jump into today's episode, and I want to start with a video of Ben Shapiro.
On the Ted Cruz jaunt is absolutely overwhelming. 59 pictures from the UK Daily Mail. Okay, the New York Times dedicated an entire report to the text messages between Heidi Cruz and friends.
In that first segment, he did what is natural for Republicans. He attacked the media. 59 pictures from the UK's Daily Mail. New York Times dedicated an entire report on the story between Heidi Cruz and her, on the text messages between Heidi Cruz and her friends. Not surprising, she's the wife of a U.S. senator who's embroiled in this. I don't know if I want to call it a scandal. Don't seem to be a scandal to me. Just bad faith on the part of a U.S. politician, and he's being held to account in the media. That's what they're supposed to do.
Right. Cruz told a television crew at the Cancun airport what's happening in Texas is unacceptable. He was wearing a Texas state flag mask and a short sleeve polo shirt tucked into jeans. The temperature in Cancun was above 80 degrees Fahrenheit on Thursday and in the 30s in Houston.
In that section, he just goes over basically the New York Times article is what it looks like. Cruz told the Houston Chronicle what was happening in Texas was unacceptable. No kidding. I mean, you've got a senator from Texas going to Cancun during a crisis. Temperature in Cancun around 80 degrees. Temperature in Houston around 30 degrees. Yes.
And then, when he came back to the United States, Cruz offered a new statement with a different tone. When he had tried to explain the vacation without regrets, speaking to reporters after his arrival home, he conceded the trip was obviously a mistake, said he had begun having second thoughts as soon as he boarded the plane to Mexico, intent on a few days of remote work in the sun. He said the plan had been to stay through the weekend with the family. That changes from his original statement where he said that he was going to go there, drop the kids, and come back. He said, on the one hand, all of us who are parents have a responsibility to take care of our kids, take care of our families. I also have a responsibility I take very seriously of fighting for the state of Texas. As it became a bigger and bigger firestorm, it became all the more compelling that I needed to come back. And of course, this trended on social media. You got flying.
In that segment, he went over the fact that Cruz put out a new statement. He was going to do remote work in the sun and stay through the weekend, a change from his original statement that he was going to drop his kids off and come back. And this is just basically the New York Times going over the fact that Ted Cruz has been lying. He's been embroiled in the ever-changing statement situation. As this became a bigger and bigger firestorm, it became obvious I needed to come back. I have a responsibility to Texas that I take very seriously. Apparently not. You were going to Cancun in the midst of dozens of your constituents dying and millions being without power and water. It's obviously not that big of a deal to you, the responsibility you have as a senator. I mean, that's just absolute BS.
The media are going further, and they're suggesting that this thing not only ought to be national news for a day, but it's like the worst thing that has ever happened in the history of mankind.
In that segment, Ben went on to attack the media again. They're not only suggesting that this should be a national story for a day, but suggesting that this is the worst thing that ever happened in the history of mankind. No, nobody's suggesting that. That's just your logical fallacy BS. That's your political hackery. No, that hyperbole is ridiculous. There is nobody suggesting that this is the biggest thing, the worst thing that ever happened in the history of mankind. Nobody. You are the only person on planet Earth, Ben Shapiro, that made that statement about this.
And believe it or not, reporters were deployed to Ted Cruz's house to check on his poodle. I kid you not. Apparently, Snowflake, that's the name of his dog, was spotted by a reporter at 1 p.m. on Thursday looking out the front door. A security guard stationed outside the property said he had been tasked with feeding and tending to the dog in the freezing home.
In that section, where reporters were deployed to Ted Cruz's house to check on his poodle. And the dog's name is Snowflake, was spotted by a reporter at 1:30 p.m. looking out the door. There was a security guard home who said he had been tasked with feeding and tending to the dog who had been left behind in the freezing house. That's the whole point of bringing Snowflake into it. Ted Cruz, or Ben Shapiro. Ted Cruz, his wife, their kids, they left the dog home in the freezing house while they were going to the beach. Ted Cruz is a senator. He's well paid. His wife is an executive for a international bank. I think she's with Goldman Sachs. Between the two of them, they have an extremely high combined income. They can afford to take the dog with them, I'm assuming. Why does Snowflake get left in the freezing house when they go to the beach?
Which is weird, because what the hell does this have to do with policy? Again, it has to do with the politician making an absolutely bad-toned optical decision. I mean, Cuomo...
There he's making this statement, politician making a bad optical decision. Nothing to do with policy, and Ted Cruz absolutely could put pressure on state lawmakers to do something with policy to help people in Texas. It certainly is a politician making a bad optical mistake.
Was treated as the greatest governor in the history of planet Earth.
There he starts talking about Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo was treated like the greatest governor in the history of planet Earth. Again, no. You're the only person in the history of planet Earth to make that statement, Ben Shapiro.
This is not whataboutism. This is a pure...
He goes on to say this is not whataboutism.
Referendum on how crappy the media are at their jobs.
So he engages in whataboutism, then turns around and says, this is not whataboutism. I just thought I'd throw that there since I know I just did that.
In one case, you have a governor actively lying about how many people died in his state because of his policy and threatening members of his own party. And the media are like, well, it's a story. We'll do a little coverage. I guess we got to cover it.
And he continues on with the stuff about Andrew Cuomo. And Andrew Cuomo is embroiled in a scandal right now. His scandal is more scandal than Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is just showing that he's a shit of a politician who doesn't need to have his position. Someone who actually wants to do public service should have Ted Cruz's position. Andrew Cuomo is just showing that he is a corrupt politician, which I don't know that surprises many people. I mean, you may have some Democrat-supporting news members in cable news who would defend Andrew Cuomo. I don't know that that's the case. As far as I know, his brother, Chris Cuomo, who happens to be a broadcast journalist on cable news on CNN, hasn't touched the thing. And I honestly don't blame Chris Cuomo for leaving it alone. They're brothers. It sounds like they have a close-knit family. And it's uncomfortable, and there are plenty of people in news between cable news, the big three cable news, CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News. There are plenty of people outside of Chris Cuomo to cover the scandal of his brother without Chris having to dive into it. And he's making this argument that the news media, I guess, doesn't want to cover it. And they're like, well, I guess we got to. It's something.
On the other hand, you have a Republican senator in Texas in the middle of a freeze that he is not responsible for, Also, by the way, not a state official. He's not the governor of Texas. He's not the mayor of Houston. He did what he was supposed to do as a senator. Was not a
And on that section, you had Ben Shapiro arguing that, on the other hand, you have a Republican governor in Texas in the middle of a freeze he's not responsible for. No, he doesn't cause the bad weather. He's also not a state official. He's not a state-level official, but he is an official of the state. He's a representative of the entire state of Texas. He did what he was supposed to do as a senator. Not true. Ted Cruz, as far as I can tell, has never done what he's supposed to do as a senator representing Texas. Ted Cruz does what he feels like is the best for his political career, always.
abiding by. Cruz is not responsible for the freeze. Cruz is not responsible for going and thawing the pipelines.
And that's the video of Shapiro. He's saying Cruz is not responsible for the freeze. He is not responsible for thawing pipes. And I wouldn't necessarily say that's true. I mean, he is a senator from Texas. He represents the entire state of Texas. Not just the Republican voters, not just the rich. He represents the entire state of Texas. And he's not doing his job. When you are an elected representative and you head off to Cancun because it's uncomfortable because your house is cold, you're not doing your job. And this I wanted to play is a clip of Joe Rogan.
Tell you what was open, the Houston airport, and my boy Ted Cruz is like,
yeah, he was out. And by the way, isn't it sad that, like, he couldn't get away with it?
But here's the thing, like, what can he do? What is the reason for him staying?
I think it's just the optics of how it looks. Yeah,
right.
But of course, no, he doesn't have any of...
Can he make it warm out?
No, I don't think he has any power to do anything good.
Maybe he should be there with blankets.
Yeah, well, it's funny. It's like the people that hate him the most are the ones that are like, he should be there. And it's like, doing what?
Well, here's the thing, though. Yeah. He was one of the vocal critics of Mayor Adler, who's a Democrat,
right,
who went to Cancun as well.
Right. What is it? Everybody goes to Cancun?
I think he was in Cancun. Was he in Cancun or was he in one of those?
Made the thing at the house.
Yes.
Like that.
But it was in Cancun or was it Puerto Vallarta? Well, it was one of those nice places in Mexico.
Yeah. And he's the mayor of Austin?
Yes.
Yeah.
He went down there and he was saying now is not the time to relax.
Yeah.
Cabo. There
Cabo.
you go. Cabo.
Yeah.
So he went down there. I mean, that's the place to relax.
Yeah.
I mean, fucking Sammy Hagar's got a song about it.
I mean, it's crazy to watch. It's also crazy that he got caught and then he came back.
Well, he said, I was always coming back. Yeah. I was being a good father. So you had to put a spin on it.
Yeah, I was dropping my face. I feel because Ted Cruz is the face of the guy that always is caught. Like, he looks like the kid at school who gets in on the prank too late and then the teacher catches him. Like, he just looks like he gets caught. He's not one of those guys who gets away with it. No matter what happens, he doesn't get away with it.
No, he's did you ever see those videos that they made where it was, I don't know who released the full video, the videos that they made where he was running for president and he sat down with his mom and he was talking about, I go to church every day, and she's like, every day?
Right.
His mom threw him under the bus. Like,
yeah.
Every day?
Yeah.
His mom was like, bitch, you don't go to fucking church
And that was Joe Rogan on his podcast. As far as I know, Joe Rogan still has the most listened to podcast in the world. I mean, he has a very, very popular podcast. And he's been criticized a lot. I get it. Some people criticize him for platforming the wrong people. People criticize him for not giving enough pushback, letting people go on his podcast and lie to his audience. Joe Rogan does long-form interviews where he lets people talk, and his approach is to try to not counter constantly and break up the interview, but to get information flowing out of people, their perspective, their ideas, whether it's good, bad, true, false, whatever, and let people hear them. At times, Joe Rogan's given pushback, and he actually had Ben Shapiro on his podcast not that long ago, and he gave pushback to Ben Shapiro, and Ben Shapiro Again, anytime he receives pushback, he crumbles apart because his arguments are made up of logical fallacy and BS. But I was given that as the other side of defense of Ted Cruz. You have Joe Rogan, who's kind of the everyman, average guy take, and he's like, he's a rich dude. His wife's a rich lady. They decided to go to Cancun. What's the big deal? And the thing is, Joe Rogan, I believe, moved his show to Texas, moved his family and his show to Texas. And if Joe Rogan decided to go to Cancun, yeah, what's the big deal? Joe Rogan also is a rich dude. And he has the money. If he and his wife and kids are like, there's no water or heat at our house, let's hit the road, go down to Cancun for 3 or 4 days and see if they fix the problem. Yeah, that's the thing with Joe Rogan. He can do that. No big deal. For Ted Cruz, he sought out this position as an elected official. He has a responsibility to the people of Texas. And as I said before, you have people that have this mindset of, I'm a professional politician. That's my job. My job is politician. I go to D.C., I'm in the House, or I'm in the Senate, or I'm in the White House. That's my job. When for the people in Congress, so many of them have this mentality of, when we're on recess, then I'm just on vacation. And I get a lot of vacations through the year because we have recesses all through the year. And the thing is, those recesses exist because Congress was not seen originally as a full-time job. There wasn't a full-time job of politician. You had people who accepted the responsibility to deal with the matters of state. But they also had businesses or farms or whatever, and I get it. In the early days, there were other people working the farms. You had a lot of racism and slavery and all that going on, but there were people who were representatives, who were in Congress, who had farms, who had businesses, who had other obligations, the way they earned their living. And recesses existed for them to go earn their living while they dedicated part of the year to affairs of state, because they were part of this small percentage of the country that was intelligent, educated, and capable of handling this responsibility. Nowadays, you have people that have a mentality of, I'm a politician full time, and when we're on recess, I'm on vacation, and that was Ted Cruz's mentality. You have other people who take the actual, Ted Cruz says he takes his responsibilities seriously, but then you see through his words and actions, he does not. You have someone like AOC. She's a House representative from a district in New York City. That's her responsibility as a elected official. When she goes on recess, she looks at it as, because she has more of a working class mentality, I'm getting paid full-time to do this, full-time type of pay to do this job. When we go on recess, what can I do? Do I need to go talk to people in my district? Do I need to go talk to people in my state? Do I need to look around and see if there's issues in the country that need attention from those of us who are paid to be elected officials? And she sees this disaster in Texas and is like, I can help with that. What can I do? I can raise money. I have networks that I set up when I ran for office. So I'll touch those networks up and see if I can raise some money for Texas. Beto O'Rourke she and Beto O'Rourke have been raising money for Texas. As far as I know, they've raised over $5 million. By now, it may be over $6 million. In the last week, Beto O'Rourke and AOC have raised more money for Texans than either of the two senators, Cornyn and Cruz. If they raise money, it's for them. It's not for Texans. When Ted Cruz goes out to raise money, and he will raise money also in very bad optical ways. He disingenuously put out advertisements during the runoff elections in Georgia. He put out advertisements in Georgia advertising to stop the steal, the thing they were that Trump was pushing after the 2020 election. And if you read the fine print, all the money was actually going to Ted Cruz's campaign funds. None of it was going towards court costs of trying to fight the supposed steal in court. Ted Cruz doesn't raise money for people. Ted Cruz raises money for Ted Cruz. That's the thing. You have people in Congress who have a public service mentality. People like AOC, Ilhan Omar, Bernie Sanders, Beto O'Rourke, who's currently not even an elected official. He used to be a representative from El Paso, but he's from Texas, born and raised, a former representative in Texas, and he gives a damn. You know, in this Ben Shapiro clip, he talks about Beto O'Rourke. He's like, well, I guess he could go provide water and blankets like Beto O'Rourke. Right? At least Beto O'Rourke understands the optical side of it. He also understands how to skateboard, which I don't know if he's thinking that somehow is a knock on Beto O'Rourke because he can ride a skateboard. Maybe Ben Shapiro's just jealous of someone who knows how to ride a skateboard because he knows if he put one foot on one, he would bust his ass. But Beto O'Rourke, I mean, he's not even holding office. And while Ted Cruz was getting on a flight to Cancun with his family to go get out of the cold, Beto O'Rourke, AOC, you had people with a public service mentality who were doing what they could, who were looking around to see what they could do. And speaking of that, I mean, you have Jimmy effing Carter. The dude is in his 90s. I think he's like 95 or 96 years old. And he has been out of office since 1980. In his 90s, that dude is putting on his overalls and his work boots, and he's going and hammering nails and building homes for people for the Habitat for Humanity charity. In his 90s, he still has the public service mentality. That's the thing. You have people that have that public service mentality. Ted Cruz doesn't have it. For me, personally, my perspective, anyone who seeks out public office should have that public service mentality. You know, Joe Rogan exclaims, what could he do? There are plenty of things Ted Cruz can do. He could go start trying to raise money. He could go start making phone calls to the people in the state. He can go out and everybody makes this bad faith argument of, oh, what's he supposed to do, dethaw the pipes? If he wants to, people would respect him more if he did that. But no, he can go out and find people that he can help. You know, he could go out. I mean, when he came back, after all of his lies and his BS, he did a photo op of loading water into people's trunks for them. He could have been doing that from the get-go. People needed water. They needed food. They needed, warmth. Do something. You're an elected official. That's your job, is to do something, not to get away. When the going gets tough, Ted Cruz gets the hell out. That's not the politician you should be wanting representing you. And Ben Shapiro, given this bad faith argument, is showing how much of a hack he is. It's ridiculous. I mean, and then it breaks away into bashing Andrew Cuomo. I'm not a fan of Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo deserves the criticism he's getting. And is he getting criticism? I mean, Ben Shapiro makes it out like Andrew Cuomo, the news media don't want to cover it. They're like, I guess we got to. No, the news media is covering Andrew Cuomo. He's getting raked across the coals right now, and for good reason. But, I mean, this idea that there's wall-to-wall coverage of Ted Cruz's trip to Cancun and no coverage of Andrew Cuomo, that's BS. All the networks are doing way more coverage of Cuomo than they are doing of Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is like that incidental piece in the news that is necessary because he's an elected official. And the part of the news media's job is to hold elected officials accountable. And when an elected official decides, While I'm on vacation, I'm going to Cancun, not going to be here with my constituents, trying to help my constituents. It's brought up. By the same token, what Cuomo did is getting brought up. And people are digging into that news story. That's why you have all these different people in New York. The Ron Kim, I believe, was the whistleblower in Queens, the local representative. You had de Blasio, the mayor of New York City, defending Kim and saying, yeah, you know, what he's saying about Cuomo, that's well known about Cuomo. But Ben Shapiro, you do a horrible job at your job. And there's no defense of Ted Cruz. There's no reason to defend it. You can criticize him, but you can't defend him because there's no defense of BS. And to try and defend somebody who is just a sleazeball, lying politician and traitor to the United States of America, there's no defense of Ted Cruz. So, Ben Shapiro, give it up.